But first, let's talk about Prince the horse.
Well, Prince the horse is part of it. Is it on now, Ted?
Yeah.
I've learned from my grandfather's journal, because he would go over to the sawmill, and the guy in the sawmill wasn't that mechanical. So my grandfather and Ernie would often go over, and they had a straight 8 Buick engine, and the guy in the mill couldn't get it going. And of course his business depended on that. So my grandfather and Ernie would go over, and there was little articles mentioned in the journal about they got that Buick going again, and they set the points and this and that. So I'm quite sure that one of my grandfather's rewards, and my grandfather would, again, he would have an account for the guy, and then instead you would trade. So he ended up with Prince, the logging horse. Well, a logging horse doesn't make the world's best farm horse. And that horse was impatient as hell. But that horse could haul a house and never complained about it. In fact, if the horse wasn't hauling a house, the horse would act as if it was. Right? And my grandfather...
Was that a Clydesdale?
Yeah, and my grandfather was always hauling on the reins and cursing the horse with admiration. Slow down, Prince. God damn. And the horse would come flying up the hill with a big load of hay, and the rear wheels would clear the ground. And my grandfather would just be waiting for the whole hay wagon to go over, but it didn't happen. And the horse was so impatient that to unload the hay wagon, then my grandfather would unhitch the horse and put it in the barn and hook up the pickup truck and then push the wagon in the barn and then hook the pickup truck to the overhead pulley system. And then they would drop down this apparatus that, I don't know what you call it, we could probably look that up, we'll Google it one day. And you could stand on top of the hay, and it was a little forked apparatus. And it wasn't quite a claw, because the teeth would go in, and then when you jumped on it, they would go to the side.
Oh,
and then you drove the truck slowly ahead, and that would raise the hay up, and then you could swing it over, and then you pulled on a rope, and that released the mechanism. And that way you got all the hay in the mow. And that was for the cows. And that was about 2 stories high, right up to the rafters. And I have slides of that. So those days I remember that. And Billy was allowed to drive the truck. My grandfather had taught Billy to drive the truck. Ernie didn't want anything to do with him. When he got older, when he was younger, Billy actually named the boat after. He was very proud.
Was this the cool barn that was on the farm?
Yes, this is the barn. The pictures are
that's
shown.
no longer there?
Yeah, that my cousin had burned down.
Oh.
Right, with all the hand-hewn wood. But I'm very happy. I've got all the pictures that preserved.
It's such an incredible place.
Well,
and
it was.
What happened? It just burned down?
No, my cousin had it burned down. When he bought the house and got the property, it became an unstable structure.
Yeah.
I just thought it was a shame that all the hand-hewn timbers and whatever from the turn of the century weren't preserved, right? You saw the pictures where half the shingles were missing already. I'm sure that's part of barn culture.
Yeah.
Right? You only do the repair when you have to.
Interesting.
So all the cows were then, you drove back the wagon into there, you unloaded it, you dropped it into there.
So this was the mechanism that your Grandpa Noel used to...
Noble.
Yeah, Noble.
Yeah. Noel is Christmas, okay.
Yeah, Noel.
But they nicknamed him Noel. They called
I was going to say, yeah.
That's funny that you say that.
Yeah.
So when we went there as children and as teenagers, and Darryl will come sometimes, right? And Darryl wasn't noted for hard work, but he'd come and put his time in. Then we would either ride with my grandfather on the hay raker, right? Or we would be mainly throwing the hay up into the wagon when it was low to the ground.
Did your grandpa have a tractor?
No.
The horse was, Prince was the tractor.
Prince was everything. Everything.
So he used Prince to plow the fields?
My grandfather and Vernon Davison and Bob had a shared tractor, but they used that mainly as a PTO, power takeoff unit.
Yeah.
And they would use that for sawing or whatever. That's the only time I ever saw that tractor and the work it did. But it was never, my grandfather did all of the plowing of the field, putting the potatoes in, all with the horse and
because they say if the conditions are right, good, your horse is in good shape, you could plow 1 acre a day.
Yeah, but it wasn't a big farm. And you'd wonder how somebody can make a living running such a small farm. Well, I learned that in the journal, that being a market farmer where my grandfather made butter and sold milk before the days when you were allowed to have unpasteurized milk. He would sell it in the community.
And butter and eggs.
And then the eggs were before my
Fishing,
time.
he did fishing.
Yeah, but he did salted and unsalted butter. This is where we had the huge, what we thought was a huge churn that would sit in the kitchen, and it was pedal operated. Oh, and that was a fearsome device, boy, if that thing ever hit you. And my grandfather would be running it with his hand, swinging the barrel, right? Swinging at high speed into a centrifuge to make the butter solidify. And then you would have all his little patterns out, the whole kitchen table with the oilcloth on top. And he had 2 boxes with different patterns. And he put them into little wooden cups like this. And then he would mark them. So they had a certain arrangement. There were 2 different patterns. One was like a star, and the other one was like squares or something, right? And then that was salted and unsalted butter. And then he would put them in the back of the F1, and he'd put it in with the spinach and with all the beets, right, and peas and carrots that he had raised in the summertime. And then he had a route that he drove, which was just right for him, just the right size. But my grandfather made his living by being a carpenter, and by re-roofing the school, by sanding all the desks in the school, by providing all the firewood for the school. In Denmark, they would call him a forester, and that's what my grandfather was. He had the wood lot, and he sold the wood, and there often pulp and paper people would buy certain sizes of wood. All of that, like the old stringy wood that was no good for anything else, it was good for pulp and paper. And they also had certain poles for pole beans and all this kind of stuff. So he had his hand in many, many different things. He'd buy chicken feed, he would buy grain, things to feed the horse, oats, and he had a line on that, and he would bring that home and sell it out of the house. And then he was the sheriff for the county, which was, I guess, in a way, what do you call it now? Notary, right? And if people, my grandfather had 2 law books at home that an educated notary would have, and if you were getting married, he'd note it, and he could say yes, they were married, and give the legal documents for that. And if the Davisons owed the Mannettes money, then they would go to my grandfather, and he would make an official statement between them, what they owed and what they didn't owe, and they would sign it. He had the power to do that, right? And I learned that later on in life. My mother gave me those books. So you can see my grandfather he was what we would call an outstanding member of the community. And they went to church, but they only went to church because that's what you should do. My grandparents were not at all religious, but you went to church because you had a sense of community, and they would go there on the big days, Easter and Christmas and confirmations and whatever, but they were the least religious people I've known besides my parents. There was no religion, none, on their side. So we're back to the haying. So my grandfather had one of those big, huge hay rakes, and you could lift the lever up and down and leave big, long rows. And then our job with my grandfather's pitchforks, and then he had a hay rake, right, to get the stubble and whatever. It was all handmade with all the little wooden teeth in it. Then we would rake it all into piles. Then my grandfather could biff that up into the top of the wagon when it was really high. In the beginning, we could get it along low. And then he would just talk to the horse.